Hello everybody, we are the Token Minorities. I'm Jolt.
And I'm Bluesy.
And we are here with a standard OU Wi-Fi battle against Archizzle, a very popular YouTuber. Now this battle is the entirety of the Token Minorities against Archizzle, so it's going to be quite the battle.
Also, this battle video is going to serve as an audition tape for us to become Pokemon event commentators. So while you're enjoying this video, please keep that in mind.
So before we dive into this battle, let's take a look at the team preview so we can give some insight as to what we were thinking before this battle actually started. So some important things to look at when you're looking at the team preview are the Mega matchup and the Lead matchup. So beginning with the Mega matchup, looking at our side, we are on M-Sticky's side. The only potential Mega Evolution on our team is the Tyranitar, and in fact it is a Mega Tyranitar. But when you look at Archizzle's side, he has two potential Mega Evolutions, in Venusaur and in Gyarados. Now, Venusaur is most likely the Mega Evolution in this case because the Chlorophyll variant of Venusaur isn't nearly as common in Gen 6 with the nerf of weather abilities.
Also, it would behoove us to take a look at the lead matchups here. Our most potential lead is going to be Breloom, especially because it's running a Focus Sash, and because it can use Spore to put to sleep anything he brings out on the field, or an effective Mach Punch or Bullet Seed to either gain priority or deal a lot of damage. As for Archizzle, his most likely leads are going to be either Conkeldurr or Deoxys Speed. Now Conkeldurr should be running an Assault Vest, so it will be really good for soaking up a lot of damage. And Deoxys Speed could be running either an offensive variant or a setup variant, which are both very good leads for his side of the team.
Now let's take a look at some of the internal components of both of our teams. Starting with our side, it appears that Sylveon is not going to be terribly useful against Archizzle's team, mainly because 3 of the Pokemon on Archizzle's side are resistant to Sylveon's only attacking move, which is Hyper Voice, which turns Fairy type due to Pixelate. And furthermore, Sylveon has the move Heal Bell, which also appears to be not terribly useful as Archizzle's team does not appear to want to spread any statuses. Venusaur is the only exception to that, now would be Sleep Powder, which is pretty much expected anyway. And as for a helpful component of our team, the Latios has Psyshock, which is going to be the only attack we have on our entire team that is going to be super effective against the Mega Venusaur, which makes Latios very important in this particular matchup.
Also, the most important Pokemon on Archizzle's team are going to turn out to be Talonflame and Excadrill. Excadrill is going to be a really nice switch-in for most of the Pokemon on our team, especially Sylveon, as its Iron Head is going to take Sylveon out in one hit. And Talonflame is going to be a really decent Pokemon to keep in his back pocket that he can take out and sweep most of our team towards the end of the battle.
So it's going to be quite the battle, but let's go ahead and dive right in.
So we were correct with our assumption that our assumptions on Archizzle's leads as he sends out Deoxys Speed. Again, we said our most likely lead is going to be Breloom, which is what we send out. Now, we know that we do not want his Deoxys to set up on our team at all, so we're going to want to use Bullet Seed. And Archizzle uses his best prediction to send out Venusaur, which is both going to make our Breloom's Spore ineffective and also soak up many Bullet Seeds in this situation and not take a lot of damage.
Venusaur is a perfect switch into Breloom in any situation, so Archizzle definitely made the correct play in going into that right away. The Bullet Seed would have been able to 2-hit KO the Deoxys Speed. So we end up going ahead and going for the Rock Tomb as he Mega Evolves here, predicting him to predict our switch. It was a pretty risky play at the very beginning, but we thought it was worth it in the end because we'd be able to get more damage on Mega Venusaur, and because we do have Tyranitar on our team, we know we can hinder Synthesis, so therefore we are hindering his method of recovery.
Now the next move we want to be able to make is to send out Landorus. As we know that Talonflame is going to be a huge component of his team, we want to bring out our Landorus and set up Stealth Rocks as soon as we can. So that's the first thing that we do. We take a risk of taking a big hit from Venusaur to set up Stealth Rocks so that his Talonflame can take about 50% damage later on in the game. But of course, his Venusaur ends up using Sleep Powder, which is going to make our Landorus pretty much heavyweight throughout the rest of this game.
We can only hope that it only has 1 turn of sleep as opposed to the maximum of 3 turns. But we go ahead and bring in Latios here because it is our only effective option against the Mega Venusaur. But he makes a nice prediction and goes into his Deoxys Speed. Now we know that Deoxys Speed almost undoubtedly has Ice Beam, but we are going to go ahead and stay in and take that hit, knowing that we can live that hit, barring a critical hit, and then go for a Draco Meteor and take out the Deoxys Speed. So that is a very nice play. Both of us probably were happy with what happened in that particular situation. but we are off to an early lead in this battle.
And now that Deoxys' speed is out, we're both taking out any sort of, especially offensive sets that he might have against our team, and also we're preventing any stealth rocks he might be able to set up on our team, which would be very bad for our team at this point.
That was a very key play. So now he brings out this Conkeldurr, and we bring in Sylveon, as it's pretty much a hard counter to any Conkeldurr set. The only thing we're actually slightly worried about is the knockoff, because we want to keep our leftovers as long as possible obviously. He just goes for a Mach Punch there to try to get the cheap kill on Latios, as he definitely knows that Latios is the biggest threat to his team. He wants to try to take it out early if possible, but we did not let that happen.
Now, here's that switch in that we were talking about earlier in the video. He's going to send in his Excadrill, one of his biggest players on his team, on our Sylveon. Most likely he's going to end up using an Iron Head on our Sylveon, but we're able to use a Wish on this turn to gain some health, and hopefully switch into our Latios to get some health, especially seeing as we're predicting he might use a Rapid Spin with his Excadrill to get rid of those stones.
Yeah, we figured he'd want to use Rapid Spin as quickly as possible to try to keep those rocks off the field. Turns out he continues to make the safe play and just goes for the Iron Head and takes out Latios, so that's a big problem for us that's going to hurt us later on, but we'll have to play around it.
Also, we send out next our Landorus T, because we know it's asleep and it can take a couple hits from Excadrill. It can stay in there for a while. We want to burn some sleep turns. Now, as opposed to Gen 5, where the amount of sleep turns kept resetting every time you sent out your Pokemon, in Gen 6, the amount of sleep turns is cumulative. So we're going to want to keep sending out our Landorus whenever we can to burn those turns of sleep so that we can continue using Landorus in this match.
So here he brings out the Conkeldurr, and we're expecting the Ice Punch. So we go ahead and go right back into Sylveon, just as we did before, because it is a pretty hard counter to Conkeldurr. It really doesn't appreciate taking the Ice Punch, but it can take it and live at about 55%, which is totally fine. We know we can probably scare him out with the Hyper Voice, and we are going to go ahead and predict the switch here and go into our Rotom, predicting him to bring in the Mega Venusaur, because we know that we have to get a status on the Mega Venusaur, or we're pretty much done for. We've already lost our only real counter, or check rather, to the Mega Venusaur in our Latios. But that's exactly what we do. We do get off that Will-O-Wisp on the Venusaur, which is nice, but we have to take a pretty powerful Giga Drain in the process.
Thankfully, the Will-O-Wisp didn't miss at all, and Venusaur doesn't have a lot of health to gain from our Rotom. So it's going to serve to be a pretty hard hit to our Rotom, but also this is going to keep the battle momentum in our favor. Now, we're going to choose Rotom to use Volt Switch as a pivot into something more useful in this match, because Rotom isn't going to be able to do much more to our Venusaur. And so we're going to send out our Tyranitar, mostly because when it sets up its Sandstorm, Venusaur's Synthesis is only going to be able to heal half of the normal health it would.
So 25%.
Which is very effective for us, meaning that it's not going to be able to heal as much per turn.
He does make the correct play in that situation, though, probably expecting us to either stay in with Rotom or go into this Tyranitar, and just goes for the Giga Drain, which actually serves as a pretty strong recovery option in that situation, with Tyranitar being weak to the Grass move Giga Drain. So now he goes ahead and goes into Conkeldurr, and we did expect that, so instead of going for a Dragon Dance, we just go for an Earthquake to get some good damage on this Conkeldurr. Turns out that the Earthquake does about 45%, and after the Sandstorm it does about 50%, which is really nice.
Now, of course, a Drain Punch from this Conkeldurr is going to be really bad for our Mega Tyranitar, especially because Mega Tyranitar is going to be another key player on our team. So we're going to burn some more turns of sleep with our Landorus T, and hopefully get it back into commission at some point in this match.
But he does make the correct play in predicting our switch and just goes for the knockoff. Now that knockoff does get a critical hit, and that really does hurt the Landorus, because it does remove the leftovers, its only method of recovery, plus it does obviously a lot of damage because of the critical hit. So that was not too good for us in that situation. But we go ahead and predict the switch into Gyarados and then bring in this Tyranitar, hoping that we can scare him out, but it turns out he's just going to stay in against, there's a lot of after turn effects here, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but he just decides to stay in while we predict the switch, and just goes for a Dragon Dance. Now we go into our Rotom here, as it is our best pivot remaining with Landorus being asleep, but we did not expect him to have Substitute.
Yeah, the substitutes that he ends up using on his Gyarados is something that's not popularly seen, but is still pretty common in the metagame. It's just not something that we've seen too often. So he ends up using a Dragon Dance substitute build on this Gyarados, which is pretty much going to make any efforts by our Rotom to OHKO it or two-hit KO it pretty much useless. So we're going to Volt Switch anyway to take out that substitute and pivot into something else on our team.
So he actually does go for that Waterfall before we can get off that next Volt Switch because it is faster than Rotom after that Dragon Dance. And that's a pretty good chunk to Rotom considering it is a max defense Rotom. But we do go ahead and go for the Volt Switch. As mentioned before, we get a useless critical hit, which we could have had it at a different time, but what can you do? And we bring the Sylveon, and here we were just trying to play with him a little bit, maybe hoping that he wouldn't know or wouldn't have learned that sound-based moves like Hyper Voice go through Substitute. So we were hoping he would predict us to try to use Toxic on him and go for the Substitute, and then we can take off probably 40 to 50% from this Gyarados, as this Sylveon is EV'd pretty significantly in special attack.
Unfortunately, he makes a very good prediction on his part. He makes another safe play and goes straight for another Waterfall, which does take out our Sylveon.
So in a sense, we might have been over-predicting in this match a little bit, but we also kind of had to do that because we were sort of counter-teamed in the beginning, with our team having so much difficulty with the Mega Venusaur and with the Excadrill.
So we send in Breloom as to kind of reset the field again. It's nice to send in your starter, especially because our Breloom has a Focus Sash. But he does a nice prediction again and sends in his Mega Venusaur, which is a very nice counter to our Breloom in this situation. So we're not able to do much except get off a Rock Tomb. So our next best guess is to bring out our Mega Tyranitar again for the same reason we did before. Now, unfortunately, he gets off a Giga Drain, which does continually suck more health out of Tyranitar, which is not good for us.
But the biggest reason why we brought out that Tyranitar is just to hinder that synthesis. Because the Mega Venusaur is burned, we do not want it to be able to get any more health back. The only chance we have is if we can keep the Venusaur at a relatively low amount of health remaining. So he goes ahead and brings in his Excadrill, which really is a problem for Tyranitar, but we did expect him to bring that in, and on the off chance that he either left in Venusaur or brought in an Excadrill that was floating on the air balloon, we went for the Stone Edge to do as much damage as possible in either situation.
Now, unfortunately, he ends up using Iron Head and taking out our Tyranitar, so chances are starting to look pretty slim that we'll be able to take out his Excadrill. Fortunately, we still have a Pokemon on our team that knows Earthquake, our Landorus T, and if we can burn off enough of the sleep turns, we'll be able to use that Earthquake to effectively take out his Excadrill, which no longer has an air balloon on it.
But the problem is that we got max turns of sleep on this Landorus, so that was the third turn we were fast asleep. That is the absolute maximum, so that's really too bad on our side. But knowing that Landorus is still technically asleep, but also going to wake up the very next turn, we want to go ahead and switch it out and not let it faint, because we don't want to allow the Venusaur to put anything else to sleep. Plus, we're also a little bit scared of Gyarados. But we go ahead and bring in the Rotom, knowing that even though he does have Substitute, we can at least prevent him from attacking us if we can switch in on a Dragon Dance, and then we can get initiative into something else.
Now again, his Gyarados continues to use the same strategy he was using before, where he will Dragon Dance and he will use Substitute, which again is going to be a very good stall for our Rotom. Again, the only move we can use by our Rotom is a Volt Switch to pivot out and destroy that Substitute, hopefully pivoting out into something that can at least do a little bit of damage to his Gyarados. But again, this Gyarados is proving to be a very good counter for our Rotom.
Yeah, this is a very good Gyarados set. I'll actually probably try it myself now that I've seen what it can do to your standard defensive Rotom. But we go ahead and bring out our Breloom, which still has its Focus Sash, and we're going to just go for the Rock Tomb, either hoping he'll make a switch into something that doesn't appreciate the Rock Tomb, hoping that he'll switch into Mega Venusaur, which would bring it down low enough so that a second Rock Tomb would take it out. However, he does make the safe play again and goes for the Bounce, which one, prevents the damage from the Rock Tomb, two, allows him to gain some health back from leftovers, and three, brings Breloom down to its Focus Sash.
Now this is the real big reason why we use Breloom, is to predict that priority from the enemy Pokemon, and to use a Spore after we hang on with our Focus Sash. So now his Gyarados is asleep, which means that we have a better chance of taking that really stally Gyarados out.
So we go ahead and go for the Bullet Seed, half expecting him to switch and half just hoping he would stay in so we could get rid of the Gyarados. But nonetheless, he does go into the Conkeldurr to take only 2 hits from the Bullet Seed, but we are able to outspeed his priority Mach Punch by using our own Mach Punch, and down goes the Conkeldurr.
Now here comes one of the biggest threats to our team, Talonflame.
Especially without Stealth Rocks on the field.
Yeah, now that Landor's T is still asleep, even though we know he's going to be waking up very soon, the Talonflame is going to be able to start to wreak havoc on our team. Now, what we're hoping at this point is that Landor's T can soak up enough damage while asleep to send out Stealth Rocks, and then hopefully force him to switch out of Talonflame and back into it so that we can effectively take it out.
Now the problem was that this was a choice banded Talonflame, so it was able to do more damage than we had anticipated. We were hoping it would just be a Life Orb variety, in which case Landor's probably at least had a chance to survive 2 Brave Birds after an Intimidate drop and attack. But unfortunately that does not happen, and Landor's does go down to the 2nd Brave Bird. But now in this circumstance, we are trying to predict him to switch out his Gyarados and go into his Excadrill, trying to get kind of greedy, you know? We figured that the only way we really had a chance of pulling this out in the end is if we can catch him trying to get greedy. And it turns out that we're not able to do that because he is, again, making this safe and smart play by leaving his Gyarados in, knowing that he really doesn't need it anymore. It was simply serving as a check to a Rotom, and at this point he can just take out Rotom with Excadrill anyways.
So thankfully we catch on to this, this trick that he's using, and we do end up using Volt Switch to take out his Gyarados. But that puts us in a very bad position, because that means our Volt Switch is going to have to force us to switch out to another Pokemon on our team, which means he can bring in either his Talonflame, his Venusaur, or his Excadrill, which we have nothing to counter on our team except most likely our Rotom.
The only chance we have left at this point is if his Talonflame does not have U-turn. And as you'll see later, it actually does have U-turn, which is too bad. But most choice banded Talonflames do. We do go ahead and bring in the Breloom on that open turn because it is our lead. We figured it was our best option. We also really did not want him to bring in Excadrill at that point. But yeah, we go ahead and switch into the Rotom, and he reveals the U-turn, which pretty much clinches the match, unfortunately. If he had gone for a Brave Bird or 2 in that situation, there's a chance, we calculated it, that Rotom would have been able to live the 2nd Brave Bird and taken it out with a Volt Switch, and that would have been huge, but unfortunately we weren't able to pull that off.
Now Talonflame is able to U-turn into his Excadrill, which has Mold Breaker, which completely negates Rotom's ability, which is Levitate, meaning that all ground-type moves are effective against Rotom now. And so his Excadrill is able to use an Earthquake against our Rotom, it gains priority, and it's able to take out our Rotom, which really just kind of puts us in a bad situation.
Yep, so that was too bad, but then we do end up in the situation where it's Breloom against Excadrill, and our Chisel knows that Excadrill really doesn't need to be saved in this situation, and we know that he knows that, so we go ahead and just go for the Mach Punch and take out the Excadrill. But he brings in his Talonflame in the end to clean up by taking out Breloom, and he escapes with a narrow 2-0 victory, an 0-2 loss for us. But it was a really close and fun match.
Yeah, we definitely want to thank you guys for watching our video. It's fun to make these narrations for you guys and to bring you commentary like this.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we will see you all next time.